Good morning, everyone. My name is Byron. I'm the Dean of Students for Middle School here at Salesian College in Chadstone. Before I introduce my guest today, I'm really excited to have a chat with Jodi. I wanted to acknowledge the current climate in which we're living at the moment. With at the time of recording this, it's during the COVID-19 pandemic, and only the senior boys have been allowed back to school. The junior boys are due to return on the 9th, and understandably, there's quite a lot of angst amongst the community with regards to what things are going to look like when they come back. So I want to acknowledge as well that it's also very difficult for some of the parents at the moment. I've heard stories of parents unfortunately losing jobs or being severely affected by the current climate. I'm not going to sit here and say, as on behalf of the school, we understand what you're going through. But, we can certainly empathize and imagine that it'd be a very challenging situation. So, the whole conversation today really talks about developing resilience and building on our understanding of anxiety, which has been amplified by the current climate. So, I guess enough of that from me. I wanted to get an opportunity now to formally introduce Jodi. And I do want to say, the first time I heard Jodi speak was last year at the Mental Health in Schools conference at the Melbourne Convention Centre, Exhibition Centre in the city. And look, there were I think from memory, about 10 presentations, Jodi, or 11 or so, I think. But Jodi's presentation was the one that really stood out to me the most, and which is why I'm really excited and really keen to get her back in. So just a little bit about Jodi. Look, she's a wellbeing expert. She's obviously a speaker and an author, but importantly, she's got 20 years of experience in clinical practice, elite sport, and in education. But it's also really important, I guess, to mention as well, Jodi's a parent as well. And, I think we'll talk a bit about that later, looking at the other angle as well, where as parents, we've got to manage our own anxieties in terms of supporting our students and our kids as well. But Jodi's co-authored a book with Michael Gross, who is a past Salesian College pupil himself. And Jodi didn't ask me to do this, but I am going to do it anyway. This is my copy of the book here. And look, it's a really great read. I picked it up from Target for, I think, about $20 about a year ago. I can't remember if that's the thing, but it's a really great read, so I certainly recommend it. So look, Jodi, really happy to have you in today. Really excited to have this chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a very difficult time. We're months into this pandemic, and it's taking its toll in lots of ways on families and on school communities. So yeah, it's really great to be here, and really looking forward to helping support your community.
Thanks very much, Jodi. And I think that's it. And the focus on this for everyone who's watching this from home as well. It's I think with our understanding of anxiety in this sense is variable amongst our community as well, and really what is it and how do we understand it and sort of start discussing it. So I thought I'd kick off the conversation this morning, the time of recording is this morning, with really getting a bit of an understanding, Jodi, like what is anxiety? Like what actually is it? What are we looking for?
So anxiety is our brain and our body's response in anticipation of a threat. And so it's like a genetic wisdom that helps us to stay safe. So anxiety is actually a really normal human emotion, and we need the anxiety to protect us. So say, for example, us or our kids are taking a different route walking home, and the sun's going down, it's getting a bit dark, and we decide to cut through a back alley or, around a place where there's not really good lighting. Our anxiety response will start to switch on to sort of tell us, oh, this could be danger, this could be dangerous. And a whole range of changes will happen in our brain and physiologically to help protect us. And that's when the fight or flight response kicks in. So it's an evolutionary protective mechanism. But unfortunately, what happens is the brain and the body react in exactly the same way, whether the threat is real, which we need the reaction for, or whether or not it's imagined. We can even think about something. For some people, doing an on-camera interview, and for some kids, even Zoom has been very threatening for them. And so their whole body goes into a fight or flight response, and it makes it really difficult to think, really difficult to learn, and it's really difficult to manage if you don't understand it and don't understand what you can do.
Okay, that sounds really good. So in that sense, though, I guess if I'm a non-expert and if I'm a parent of a student, understand I've got my own anxieties to manage, and I know we'll as a parent, if I were in that position, how would I understand, looking at my kids, coming home from school, how would I know, for example, what are some of the signs that I could be looking out for?
Yeah. So one of the ways to break it down is have a think about how they're responding physically, how they're responding emotionally, and what they're doing behaviourally. So we can break it down into those three. So physically, for a start, when the fight or flight response kicks on, it's there to help us to face imminent danger. So if we fight, we protect ourselves. If we undertake flight, we flee, we run, we bolt, we get out of there. Either way, we're safe. So the physical changes that occur support those two options. Sometimes we freeze as well. So heart rate beats, heart rate escalates, breathing changes. Some children who are anxious, they'll tell you that they struggle to get in a deep breath. They might really try so hard to get a deep breath, or they say, I can't get a full breath, I can't breathe properly. Some kids yawn a lot because they're trying to get in that extra oxygen. So they're physical signs to look out for. There can be some trembling because the adrenaline that fills the body to help us to fight or flee floods our whole system, and it can cause a bit of a tremor at times. Kids who are anxious will perspire as well, because in anticipation of all of this movement for fight or flight, the cooling equipment needs to turn on to sort of cool our body down. So perspiration can be another sort of physical sign of anxiety. Sick stomachs or sick tummies is another sign. And I know when I was very little in prep, I started having my first experiences of anxiety, and we get upset in the stomach because blood is diverted from our digestive system to our major muscle groups so that we can fight or flee. And in doing that, digestion's not important. So when the blood is diverted, we can start to get that nauseous feeling, and the feeling that we've all probably experienced as adults. Doesn't feel good. And if it's not understood to be anxiety, parents have even ended up in the emergency department with children who are having all these physical symptoms that were unrecognisable as an aspect of their mental health.
Okay.
So that's the physical side, which can be, more obvious than how kids are feeling and what they're thinking. So that's sort of the second part. Lots of worries, lots of catastrophic thinking, lots of what ifs. When we're really anxious, it's around uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen, which is why this time during the COVID-19 pandemic has been especially hard. And so that's internal. So that's a little bit harder to obviously see unless we're having really open communication with our kids. And the last one is behaviour. In terms of behaviour, we have a lot of avoidance because things that make us anxious don't feel safe. So we want to avoid them or, find a way to get out of them. And also kids who are anxious can get really emotional. So outwardly you might see a lot of tears or anger, and that's because the part of the brain that sort of sounds the alarm is part of the emotional processing centre of the brain as well. So we can have a lot of big emotions. So
that's great. So with that as well, I mean, I guess in the current climate that we're in, everything's remote, and we're sort of limited to a certain extent with regards to reading those non-verbal cues. Like you have, kids in the classroom or kids at home or something. I've heard as well, I'm not sure how true this is, but you hear things like, kids will not often say, I have a bad day. They say things like, oh, can you come play with me, come hang out with me, or something like that. And I know that particularly from the parenting perspective, as well as being a teacher, without having actually seen the kids, sometimes what happens is, we start to get all this information about outstanding work, right? Outstanding work. The boys go, he hasn't handed in X, Y, Z. Teacher starts issuing what we call a caution here, which is actually something to do with a formal warning, I guess, in that sense, to say to the parent and to the kid, mate, you haven't done your work. I can probably imagine that's not going to do very good for the boys' anxiety levels in that sense. So is there a way that, I guess, with parents, if we start to get into, and teachers, we get into that way of expecting the boys to be able to perform at a level? I know you talk about perspective before in your book as well, and how do we look at reflecting upon our own perspectives when managing kids' anxieties?
Yeah, look, I think expectation is something at the moment that we're all, trying to struggle with in terms of our own work and our children and their own homeschooling and the like. And so I think one of the things we need to do is just to really keep a close eye on our children and just be in constant communication and really listen so that our children know that we are a safe place to land and that they can share with us how they're going. In terms of perspective, when it comes to not getting things done, it can be a bit of a line to walk, because certainly when kids are anxious, the last thing we want them to do is to just bow out and not participate and not engage. But we also don't want to push them to a point where, and that's a question I'm often asked by parents, is in straddling that line. And so, we write in the book a bit about the dog and cat parenting, and I think this applies to teaching as well. And I was a teacher for many years. Michael and I joke, because I've got a more dog type personality, in that dogs are very friendly, they're very warm, they won't turn their back on you, they'll engage. Cats can be more like the parent who's the cat dropping the kid off school, the child off at school, will say, "Have a great day, parent, teacher, just a little bit of extra help here," and walk away and let it sort of unfold naturally in the classroom. So it's a matter of the dog type part of our personality is that nurturance, that warmth, that empathy, that validation and understanding. The cat type part is, well, we need to also challenge our kids to not let anxiety get in the way of doing what really matters. And that's the philosophy that I work by, and Michael and I have written the book by, is you can be anxious, but you can still do what's important. And
so with regard, sorry, I cut you off there. Go on.
I was just going to say, you can do that in conjunction and in communication with your children.
Okay, because I was going to say that I think one of the biggest, concerns that we get, which has been definitely amplified as a consequence of the current climate, is exactly what you've spoken about there, with parents saying to us, because here at Salesian, we're very big on this idea of working in partnership with our parents, because we always say, if we've got this common goal, if we're working towards the same goal, we're on the same page here. We all want what's best for their kids, including the kids themselves, even though they may or may not realize it. One of the biggest things that we get in terms of by way of feedback from parents, even from the very earliest stages, how do we know how hard to push him? How do we know if we're going to push him to the point where, I'm paraphrasing, he might get to the point where, his attendance is down, he's avoiding coming to school. He used to like playing sport, but, suddenly he's stopped doing all these things. And, sometimes, as we say, some parents will, like the cat in that sense, will say, oh, it's just down to hormones, he'll get over it, he'll get past it. But then you also get other parents as well who are suggesting things like, for example, we'll drop him off at school, we'll pick him up early from the day, and we kind of go, well, we've got to get that balance to allow him to build that resilience. So have you got any thoughts on how do parents and teachers really juggle that expectation to say, how hard do I push him before I push him too far?
I know it's a difficult decision to make. And one of the things that I like to suggest is to introduce children, no matter what age they are, because no doubt families who are watching will have children of all ages, is introduce an emotional thermometer, just the idea of an emotional thermometer. And I always picture one of those old sort of mercury bulb thermometers. And really just, we've in our home, we have a traffic light system. We have a green, amber and red. That's pretty straightforward. The kids here, our kids are 10 and 12. In the past, I've used a thermometer, but, that's about, where are you at in terms of your stress and your anxiety? And so in having that tool to communicate, so children will learn to go, well, when I'm really stressed and I'm really feeling like I can't concentrate, can't sit still, really upset, well, that might be a 9 or a 10. And if we're in communication with our children, and I've had similar situations here, homeschooling, home learning for one of our kids was much more difficult than the other. And so I had to just be in communication. Where are you at? All right, what are we going to get done? And set plans and set goals together, because we do need anxious kids to recognize that they can feel their discomfort. They can feel all of those feelings, but they can actually still do the work. if they put in some strategies to help them relax and calm that anxious brain. So it might be a matter of week to week or even day to day for some families, sitting down with the student and their child and saying, what is it that we want to accomplish tomorrow? What are we going to get through? Okay. And then plan the day so that there are ample breaks and brain breaks. And I love this book, which was printed by the Institute of Positive Education. No commission for me, just a really great little book that gives you a whole lot of little activities that you can do for movement, which is the natural end to the fight or flight response. Okay. And no doubt we'll talk about other strategies that can help. So setting goals, and if there's a really big goal, like say for example there is a particular unit of inquiry or a particular project that a child is engaging in, break it up into smaller parts. That's another way to do it. But you know, the overarching advice that I would share would be to think about setting up that communication around learning as a parent where your child is at in terms of their stress. And then when you use the management strategies, help them to recognise that, oh, when I do this, when I go out and shoot hoops for 10 minutes, oh, I go from a 7 to a 4. Or when I do 10 minutes of mindfulness on the Smiling Mind app, I go from a 6 to a 5, you know, or whatever it is that works for them. And staying in contact and communication with them. It's the only real way to be able to help move them forward as a team rather than sort of feeling.
Yeah, I think that's you touched on a really important point here. Certainly something that we are really big on here at Solution is that ongoing communication with regards to making sure that we're communicating with parents what the concerns are and vice versa. And the thing is that I wanted to sort of move us into a little bit here is that there's times, I guess, where students, or as a teacher here in school, I'm putting on that hat now with teachers here at the school, you know, I'm going to quote Brene Brown, who I'm sure you'll be aware of Brene, and I remember watching a video on her, I think it was a TED Talk a few years ago now, talking about empathy. And specifically not pretending to understand how the kids are feeling, I guess, in that sense. And instead of saying things as simple as, you know, I'm not going to understand how you feel. But I can imagine that what you're going through is pretty tough, and I'm glad you told me. But I guess what I wanted to ask as well now is, in a teacher in the classroom where we've got this, say, 25 kids sitting in front of us in the room, and, you know, ordinarily we pick up on patterns of behavior where kids may be, you know, he may be always on time to school, suddenly starts showing up late to school, not submitting his work, his attendance is dropping, his marks are dropping. To me, those are, I think, are pretty obvious signs, I guess, in that sense. But if I'm a teacher in the classroom, I guess from your experience of looking at this particular scenario, if I'm starting to pick up on this, other than the communication, what are some of the strategies I can use, I guess, in the first instance to sort of get a bit of an idea in terms of what's going on?
So this is about talking to the student. So what I would do as a teacher is I would create some time and space to have a conversation and just say, look, this is what I've observed. You know, what's happening? And first of all, ask the question. And the student may or may not want to share, and that can be, you know, depends on the relationship with the teacher. And there may be some teachers in the school that children feel more comfortable talking to, like we all do as humans. We have our people that we feel more connected with and closer with. As a teacher, I would take that tact, and I would try to open that conversation and open that communication. And obviously the teacher will be in communication with the family. But also in the classroom, I think as teachers, it's really important that there's some psychoeducation in the classroom and also some role modelling. And I think it's time, you know, 1 in 4 people experience a mental illness. So we're everywhere. You know, I have a severe anxiety disorder that I'm medicated for, and I'm very open about that. And there'll be a lot of teachers in the community who have had their own struggles. I'm not suggesting that teachers need to be open and disclosing that's personal or inappropriate in the classroom, but we can all say things like, oh goodness, I had an anxious morning this morning. You know, I was running late and I could feel my heart racing. And you know, when that happens, you know, it's something that, you know, if I did, you know, I took a few breaths, and you know, does anyone else ever feel like that? And just, you know, starting this conversation about anxiety and about, you know, mental health, because we feel alone when we're anxious and we're struggling, having a lot of worrying thoughts or catastrophic thoughts or intrusive thoughts in the case of OCD. You can feel very much alone and that no one will understand. As a teacher in a classroom, if you can start to do some formal education around anxiety in the right classes and the right circumstances, teaching kids about the brain and about the response and the physiology, what it all means and how to manage it. But also just role modeling, to say, oh, I'm a bit stressed, guys. I'm talking to all the staff after school tonight, and that can be stressful for teachers talking. So I'm just going to take a few breaths, or let's all do 5 minutes of mindfulness because I need it, and I'm sure everyone else will benefit from it. And just starting to sort of bring it in a way that feels ad hoc, doesn't feel intrusive for the kids, but they're starting to see, oh, this is normal stuff. Everyone goes through this, and that starts to normalise it for them, which is something that's important to do.
Yeah, because I think that other point of normalising anxiety too, because I know even in a few years ago, when you start mentioning the concept of anxiety, people go, well, we're not really sure what that is. We're not really sure what we can do to address anxiety. And we're talking about modeling positive or good behavior, I guess, in that sense, and modeling behavior for the kids. Would you be able to talk a little bit about, I guess, from your perspective, the importance of modeling good behavior? I know you did talk about it there, but particularly from a parent's perspective and as teachers, we sort of, talked about teachers there. But because I think it's really important that we've got consistency as well across from the school and at home, making sure that the kids get it, the teachers at school, they care about me. Mum and dad, they care about me. How do we get that message across to the kids? Because when we say that to the kid, usually they go, well, sir, stop making it weird. It's like, well, I'm not trying to make it weird. But what I'm trying to say is we give us stuff. That's what we're trying to do. So have you got a theory about that?
Yeah. So, we know people care about us by the way they listen to us and by the way that they respond. So in terms of listening, we're there's a lot going on in life. This pandemic has been a real gift in many ways. I know that that's not the case for everybody. I know that there have been and I know people as well who've had some very serious outcomes as a result of the pandemic. When I say that it's a gift in many ways, I think it's a gift in terms of time. It's given us back a lot of time, taken away activities, taken away a lot of travel, a lot of car trips, and given us more time to be there for each other as families. I think that that's been one of the positives that's come out of it.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, it definitely, and it gives us time to listen. And there's a good strategy to use as a good listener is even just trying to take on 2 or 3 of the words of the last conversation that was shared with you, so that your children feel heard, students feel heard, even if we paraphrase. So they might have a conversation about, oh, look, the dog, oh my gosh, I was late to school, the dog got out of the gate and we couldn't find the dog and it's been a really stressful morning. And, if we're really listening, we can say, oh my gosh, how did the dog get out of the gate? Or that, and then empathizing, saying, gosh, that must have been such a difficult morning for you. No wonder that you're feeling a bit stressed and anxious. And, I'm glad you told me and thank you for sharing that with me. And please let me know what happens. And really showing interest. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, what makes us happiest in life are our connections with people. There's a 75-year-long study, and there's a great TED talk about that too, about really what makes us happy. And it's the people in our lives and our relationships. It's critical. So I think when it comes to role modeling that care, it's about listening. It's about empathizing and validating, saying, I hear you and I can see that this is really hard for you. What that does is it shows the child that they've been heard, because, and we know as parents, I mean, we had a joke at home the other day, something happened, and I've got a really reflexive startle reflex. I mean, a leaf fell on me the other day and I jumped. That's anxiety. And my husband sometimes says, oh, just relax. And I'm like, never thought of that. Thank you so much for telling me. I'll relax, and we joke because it's a natural thing to do, to say, just calm down and tell someone all the reasons why there's no need to worry. But if someone's worried, what they need to hear is, oh, I see that this is really hard for you. We don't have to agree that it's a good reason to worry. But we can empathize and validate, saying, I know that this is hard. This is causing you some stress. And then we can start to use other strategies to talk about how they can manage their thinking.
Okay. So before we start going into further more of those other strategies, and I have heard before that, and I think we know from our own experiences as well, that when someone is sort of strung up and a little bit worried, the last thing you want to do is to tell them, mate, relax, because that usually doesn't go down too well. So we'll talk about those strategies, I guess, in a bit. But before we do that, because some of the biggest concerns that kids are expressing now at this stage, and parents as well, is, my kids have just got back to school. There's all this new uncertainty. There's a new norm. We're waving at each other across the corridor, and culturally as well. Some people, you handshake, you kiss each other, and all that sort of stuff. But before we get into that, I wanted to get your thoughts on this view as well, because understanding now that kids these days, they all have a laptop. They've all got phones. They've got some sort of connection. They're reading and they're consuming a lot of I guess, media and news at this point. And without getting too specific in terms of that aspect of it, how do we look at supporting our students and our kids, I guess, in that sense, to be able to consume a healthy amount of news and to be able to, not say block it all out, but to be able to consume a healthy level so that they're informed and to be able to make informed decisions?
Look, it's really important. The news is always bad. It's very depressing, and unfortunately we get used to it, and we can hear terrible things on the news, and when we're used to watching the news all the time, it starts not to impact us as much, and that's not good either. What happens is, just as a little bit of extra information, when we're anxious, there's a threat, we focus on the threat. And so we want to know what's happening. We want to know what are the answers. We also have a lot of uncertainty. We crave certainty. So we want to watch the news. So there's two really strong drivers for why we want to be informed. And you can, your Twitter feed can be full of it, or, anything online that, any source that you go to. What I would recommend is setting a time limit, or just being involved in one bulletin a day. Sometimes, that might not be enough. Then you might want to say, all right, I'm going to limit it to a news bulletin in the car on the way to school at 8:30, and maybe tuning into the news in the afternoon in whatever media form that they like to consume. I think, in my mind, and as humans, we need to understand why sometimes just being told this is not in your best interest is not enough, especially for our very savvy children. They're very informed, very switched on, and I think if we help them to see that there is a strong driver, yes, you're going to want to do this, it's not good for your mental health, because it actually re-triggers the alarm in our brain, and so it fuels the anxiety, it doesn't settle it. So having those as background foundations on which to make good decisions can often help as well.
Okay, so I guess with that too, and where we sort of segue into the component on the return to school, because I think that particularly looking at a school setting, you get a lot of kids here on site, and for me as well, I'm a biology teacher by training. Coincidentally, we're talking about immunity. Coincidentally, a year 12 bio at this point. So some elements or parts of our population, I guess, in that sense, I believe anyway, are quite well informed. But you also get, I guess, the whole uncertainty of coming back, that people are perceiving a threat that may or may not be there. So what would your advice be with kids coming back to school, and parents, supporting their kids coming back to school? They're not quite sure. They've been communicated with, they've been told, uniform, classes as per normal. The whole physical and social distancing thing is still happening. Sport is off, for example. They've been given a lot of this information, but they might still be a little bit worried about the return in that sense, of this perceived threat. How do you respond to parents, or to support parents and students in that particular scenario?
Yeah, and one of the other things that I think is difficult for children coming back is the friendships, and for some, having an extended break from a friendship group, that socially, especially in secondary school, socially, it's a very important developmental time, and children, in that adolescent age group, have been really disconnected. They've struggled to make that leap in terms of building their independence from their parents as well. And so it's been quite a developmentally challenging time as well. So there's lots of reasons to feel edgy and anxious. And I would start by normalizing it, and by talking about, having those family meals and those conversations about, as the day creeps up, the 9th is next Tuesday, talking about what the kids are feeling, and you know, if there's any specific things that they're concerned about. And I think as parents too, role modelling your thoughts about returning to your own workplaces and going back into circumstances that are you've had a big break from as well, so that you can share and role model and generate these discussions. Normalising it is a really important first point, because there's very good reason to feel uncertain, because yes, we are facing a threat. The COVID pandemic is ongoing, and there is still the threat of infection and a second wave. And so I think just letting kids know that, you know what, yes, it's understandable that you're feeling like that. That alone will help them to settle. Also, to help them to, you know, have in their pocket a couple of, you know, quick strategies that they can use if they are starting to feel their anxiety build to a point where it feels like it's getting overwhelming, so that they can self-regulate and manage. And perhaps also discuss with them about, if they are feeling particularly overwhelmed and anxious, what might they do when they're at school? Who might be that first port of call that they can go to? Would it be a close friend who they can share with? And, you know, that often helps, just sort of having a chat, and distraction can help as well, as can obviously speaking to one of their teachers. So there's three things I'd say: really normalise it, teach some strategies that will help to reduce the anxiety in the moment, and answer their questions and connect them with who's going to be that person they go to. Because when we're highly anxious, the prefrontal cortex, which is behind the forehead, it goes offline. It's not available because the body is in fight or flight mode. Executive functions aren't needed, and so clear thinking is often hard to access. So having thought in advance about, okay, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm going to push my feet into the floor, I'm going to take 5 deep, strong breaths slowly, help to calm my anxious brain. And if I need to, there's this person that I can go to if that strategy isn't helpful. Pre-planning that is going to sort of help bypass that trouble of thinking when they're in the midst of a really anxious moment.
So with that, you know, and I think those making it tangible to kids as well is really important, particularly, you know, we always talk about in education, making sure that, you know, what is in your head and what comes out of your mouth has consistency in terms of what you're trying to get out. You know, just by way of example, teachers would be at the stage now, you know, at time of recording this, the year 11 exams are happening. And, you know, some as a year 11 teacher as well, sometimes kids write stuff in their exams and you mark them wrong because it may not be correct. And they go, but sir, that's what I actually meant to say. It's like, well, that's not what you wrote. So there's a disconnect there. But I think at the same time, I wanted to touch on a point as well that you brought up with regards to strategies and the communication. With parents supporting the kids, I mean, understandably, this is going to be, from personal experience as well. It's challenging getting your kids back into school because they may not be necessarily aware of my circumstances. They might know mum, dad, whoever might have some challenges at work or something's happening at work, but they don't always know. So what's your advice to parents then in terms of being able to best support kids back into school, but also managing their own anxieties if they have, I guess, depending on the degree that they have it?
Anxiety is contagious, so if we're anxious, it can rub off on our families. So managing ourselves is important, and it's been particularly hard as adults to get any time alone, and we do need time away from our families as individuals as well as couples if we're in a marriage or in a partnership, away from kids. That's been particularly hard. What I would encourage parents to do is to do their very best to carve out some time to manage their own stress. Exercise is a critical part of managing stress and anxiety for lots of reasons. Lots of neurotransmitters are switched on and increased, and it's a natural end to the fight or flight response. So even as an adult, managing your own anxiety through strategies that work for you, walking and talking with a friend, fantastic. Find the things that work for you to help you to sort of take off the pressure valve, because we've all been under a lot of stress and we've all been under the one roof for a long time. So find what works for you. Perhaps it is, to a point where you do need your own professional support. And telehealth, I was just talking to a psychologist the other day over Zoom. It's absolutely amazing. You do feel very connected. So professional support is only a phone call away to your GP as well to sort of get that ball rolling.
Sorry, I cut you off. No, go.
I'd also just think about the transition. So if you've been, so it's called the third space, and Dr. Adam Fraser's done a lot of work in this area, transitioning from one state to another. So if you're very stressed, you've been on a difficult call, or there was technology trouble, or for whatever reason you've had a difficult time in the day before reconnecting with the kids, whether it be after school or from one room in the house to another, just take a moment to sort of reflect on what's happened, reset with a few deep breaths or whatever it is that suits you, a few yoga stretches or a bit of skipping or a quick chat with a friend, and then sort of get ready to sort of re-enter that next space. So that using that third space and taking that break in between one to the next can be really helpful as well. Go on, Colin.
No, sorry, that's all right, because there's such a good conversation in that sense, and I don't want to cut you off because obviously with Zoom there's a little bit of a lag going on there as well. But I wanted to pick up on a point as well and ask you, particularly it has to be age appropriate, but in the setting that that we work in here in the secondary boys' school in southeastern Melbourne, obviously every school's going to have contextual issues that influence a culture. I know that some of the kids have said to me personally before in the past, students who I teach here, hey, sir, I know that things are going on with mum and dad. Things are busy. They don't always tell me what it is. And they want to, and effectively the message they're trying to get across is, I want to help mum and dad. We know they're struggling. We know something's up. We know there's a whole bunch of pressures on there. But I think maybe the natural response as parents, we don't always want to, I guess, not impart that, but to sort of to project that onto our kids. So have you got any thoughts about how do we support kids in supporting their parents, but obviously without undermining the parents, because kids want to help out?
They do. And often as kids, there's this element of, what did I do? Did I do something? And wanting to fix it is a really natural, because they want peace. They want peace in their home. And there's a lot more stress in family homes at the moment. And so I think, and again, what you said before is really important in age appropriate ways. And it's essential that our kids know we are human, that we have a whole range of human emotions. We can't expect our kids to learn and develop emotional intelligence if we're not willing to show them our own experience of different emotions. And I'll share an example with you. I had a lot of tears 2 weeks ago, a lot of tears. I was inconsolable there for a little while, and now I was, took myself off, and that's very, very rare for me. But the stress of the workload that I had at the time, and having the children both at home and various different needs of different kids and other things going on in my life, just bubbled over. And so that was an extreme, and I took myself off, calmed myself down, and just, settled myself down. Later on, I came out and I said to the kids, look, you'll obviously know that I've had a really difficult time over the last sort of half an hour or so, and just wanted to let you know that, I have been feeling, my stress levels have been high. You can give them a couple of reasons that are age appropriate. I'm writing a second book. The deadline is today, and I finished it 2 weeks ago.
I hate to contribute to the stress levels, so
writing a book about anxiety. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I can imagine the irony. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's one extreme. And obviously, under these circumstances, we have had we probably had more extreme emotions than we would normally. Other times, my kids might see me and might see that I'm not my normal happy bubbly self, and I'll just say, look, you know what, I'm just not having a particularly great day, and or I'm disappointed that I was hoping to do this and it didn't work out, so I'm feeling disappointed. And you know what, I know that I'll be able to move through this, and look, I'm still going to go and make dinner. Can you come and help? Can you come and peel some carrots? Because helping our kids, number one, see that we experience all human emotions is really essential. Number two, teaching them that we can sit in our emotions. I mean, we don't have to be cooking dinner, but we can sit with difficult emotions. They won't hurt us in the sense that we will be standing and alive and available to keep on moving forward once that emotion has sort of moved through, and that we actually can still do things when we're not feeling 100%. They're really important lessons. I have a daughter, and she's had a great disappointment lately. She's 10 and she wanted TikTok, and we said no. And she was very upset, and she was getting ready for school one of these mornings, and she was very disappointed. I sat with her. I acknowledged that she was disappointed. I empathized with her. We sat for about 10 minutes and then I said, right, what have you got left to do for school? Because that's a good trick. Don't tell them you've got to do this and this. Ask them what they've got left to do so that they become more independent. And she said, I've got to clean my teeth. And I said, well, off you go then. And she said, but I'm disappointed. And I said, honey, you can be disappointed and you can still clean your teeth. And she went, okay. And off she went. And, you know, these are tiny little steps forward to having a difficult time, but still being able to stay true to what's important, stay true to your values and do what matters, even when all your ducks aren't in a row.
So if we look at, say, just someone that comes to my mind without mentioning names and whatnot, but we consider the effects of the, and I always say that being in the community that we're in currently, with the education community, we're very fortunate for many different reasons. We get to work with kids, we get to see a lot of change in their development over the years. But at the same time, the elephant, I guess, in the room as well is that we were fortunate enough to have that stability in terms of saying we have a job to come back to. We have the kids are going to walk in the door, next week. Some are already back, as of last week. There's some parents in that sense. We know that, for example, working in aviation, if we just by an example, there's one parent, son was in year 9. Her particular industry was obviously hit very, very hard, and it can be very overwhelming, I guess, in that sense. And you couple that with the uncertainty. We were talking about the struggles in terms of getting her kid back into school and being able to manage that transition coming back in. Is there a way in terms of parents and their levels of uncertainty? And we talk about things that work for them, and I know you talk about exercise in your book and the importance of exercise, the routine, and making sure you get enough sleep and eating healthy. Have you got a way of talking to parents who don't normally do this? I think self-care is something that we forget about sometimes, unfortunately. What would you say to the parent that sort of hasn't really been doing all that, but now finds themselves in a situation by being a victim of circumstance? I guess you now have more time. Have you got a theory on that?
Well, we all know the aviation metaphor of putting on the oxygen mask on yourself first. And I remember traveling with my parents, not a lot when I was a child, but thinking, hang on a second, shouldn't I get it first? And not understanding it. But as a parent, look, I think that, I think we know that we're not at our best as parents if we're not looking after ourselves. It's a matter of prioritizing that over other expectations and over other demands on our time. So what helps, I think, is for parents to take a little bit of time to look at what their values are, and values guided action is what can really help us to make decisions that are in the best interests of us and our families. So for example, if family is a very high value for you, we all want to be the best parents we can be. If we recognize that as a value, and then we look at how we're aligning our behavior to that value, that can sometimes be quite telling. And we can be committed, wonderful parents every single day just by doing simple things for our kids: listening, empathizing, validating, supporting, playing, having fun, laughing, and also growing independent kids. But if we're so spent, or we're so stressed, or struggling to a point where we're unable to do that, that's going to impact on us and make our mental health move in the opposite direction to what we'd like, and it'll impact on our kids. If we can really think about what's important and even structure some time, that can often be a way to just start making the habit of doing things for ourselves something that gets done, that doesn't get swept off the end of the to-do list. Because at the end of the day, if we're not well and not looking after ourselves, we can't expect to be there to support our kids in the way that they need us to. It might be simply just saying, I'm going into the bedroom and I'm going to put on a meditation for 10 minutes. It could be, I'm going to go out for a walk for 20 minutes and just schedule it, put it in the calendar so that other things don't creep in around it, and make sure that the family understand that that's a priority so that they can also support you to take that time and look after yourself. If you are really struggling with your mental health, and you do feel like you need extra support, I really recommend making an appointment with your GP, because there's a lot of great help that's available for you, and there's a lot of support even just on helplines at the moment that can be there to support you if you can't carve out that time for self-care. Try to make time for some phone call and start to get some counselling support to help you to move through if you're in a really difficult circumstance.
I think as well that, and that's from the parent perspective. I certainly know that, at the time of recording this anyway, my daughter's birthday is this upcoming weekend. She's turning 3, and there's all this whole thing about making sure that, we do the best we can. It's got to be nice. It's got to be memorable. But, we spent some time on the weekend and we looked at it and thought, well, did we even ask her what she wanted? Thought of it from her perspective, and she wanted all these balloons. It's all mismatched and everything, but who cares? Like, it doesn't matter in that sense where we shift our expectations. But I wanted to go on to the teacher expectations too, because I think that we talk a lot about this partnership where parents are supporting the kids at home. They want what's best for the kids. Teachers here want what's best for the kids as well, and the kids themselves also, I guess, they do too, but they may not necessarily understand that perspective yet. And I always like to say, teachers are people who lose sleep over other people's kids. They wake up at night, they go, oh, have I done that test for this kid? Have I given him his feedback? Did I reply to his email? And, certainly in the situation that we're in, there's all that, I guess, stress, there's added stress that's on that as well. Have you got some advice in terms of teachers understanding parent perspective? Not suggesting that, some of us are not parents, but understanding perspective of parents and what they may be going through at this point. How can we as a school best support them as a family in their partnership in supporting the kids?
I think teachers are doing a brilliant job, and I think that, that everywhere I turn, everyone's taking their hats off to teachers and finally understanding exactly what goes on in the classroom during the day now that we've all been homeschooling our own children. And, I was a secondary teacher for many years as well. So what I would say is that and what's worked for us in our family with our school too is just offering that open line of communication, so that if a child is struggling and a parent needs to contact the school to come up with some sort of modified learning plan, then or whatever it is that is available for that, for, extra support for their child, that just knowing that the school is there and that they know who to contact to ask. And it might be that you contact the year level coordinator, it might be that they contact you, it might be that they contact the subject teacher. I'm not sure what the pathways are, but one of the things I think is for them to know that, look, we understand for the school is communicating and doing this very interview is communicating to the parents again how much Salesian College is supporting the families and the parents. So really just keeping on reinforcing the idea to parents that we're here, that we know that this is going to be a difficult time for some students. Let's just stay connected. Please don't let things get too far out of hand before you get in contact with us, because it's easy to sort of pick things up when they're starting to slip rather than sort of letting them get to a point where, it's really difficult to even get the child to come along. And yeah, I really think that just that open communication, that invitation, please contact us if you've got, some concerns and queries, and that they've got clear avenues through which to do that.
It would be a small, I guess, percentage of very, very small, and I have to say that, and it's not just me trying to cover my basis in that sense, but it would be a very, very small number of parents, I guess, in the years that I've been at this school anyway. And I know it vary from school to school. But, you get that odd parent as well that, for a lack of a little bit harder to win over, I guess, in that sense. If I tell the school that my son is anxious, or if he's, got severe language disorder or whatever it may be, he may be treated differently, he may be stigmatized, he might be labeled, and these are things that we here at the college have at the forefront of our mind, and we work on extensively in building that relationship with the family. Have you got any advice to parents who may be potentially in that area now that may have noticed things that have come out as a consequence of this pandemic and gone, oh, I've noticed that he's actually a bit more on, he struggles with a particular subject or whatever it is. And they may not necessarily be as comfortable with forthcoming with the school. Have you got any advice on that?
It is hard because it's difficult if we think one of our children is struggling or is showing a difficulty in a particular subject, or we're noticing that they can't sit still in and in their seats, and there are genuine challenges that a lot of children do face in the way of ADHD and autism and anxiety, and challenges with dysgraphia and various dyslexia, various challenges. And I really think that, again, I think this comes down to that discomfort, that yes, there can be a lot of discomfort around that, and a lot of fear as well, and understandably that if we think that there's something not tracking quite as we'd like it to be, as we thought it was with our kids. I think recognizing that there's that fear and that anxiety about it, but knowing that it's really important to raise that with the teacher and just open that discussion. Teachers obviously do spend a lot of time with our children and have a lot of observations. So, knowing that at the end of the day, it's in the very best interests of the student for any particular underlying challenges to be identified and to be addressed, the sooner the better. The same as us, if we need to have a skin check and we're a bit worried about something, well, the more we put it off, the more we're putting ourselves behind the eight ball in terms of treatment. And I think keeping that end in mind, knowing that at the end of the day, as parents, we want what's best for our kids. That's why it is so fearful, it does evoke so much fear. So having that open conversation with the teacher and just saying, look, this is what I've observed. Can you please share with me what you've observed? And then, it's not up to the teacher, obviously, to sort of say what they think it might be, even though teachers can often have a really good idea. But then, the next avenue would be, okay, well, it's then off to the GP, or if the child has a paediatrician, or whatever the next avenue is, to sort of start to get some more answers.
Okay. So I guess just being mindful of the time as well. I know it's been a great conversation. I wish we could be, talking a little bit longer. We know we're all busy. We've all got things to do. You've got that deadline you've got to get to, and got to get to a class as well later on. I guess I wanted to ask the question as well. As we're moving the return to school date, we talked a bit about, or quite a lot actually, about what parents can do to support their kids getting back into school. We've also talked about kids potentially how they can support their parents, and teachers being supporting of the families in that sense. With regards to moving past this, because obviously the pandemic will pass and it'll come to a stage where things are normal again, but it's not really normal, is it? It's 20, as of today, I think here in Victoria, it's 20 people per restaurant, I think it is. You're allowed to eat out from today or something like that. It's all getting into that new social norm of not handshaking, high five, all that sort of stuff. What advice do you have for families, I guess, in dealing and coming to terms with these changes, knowing that things will be different, and we don't know how long it'll be until it gets back to normal, I guess, in that sense? Have you got any advice for families who sort of have that mindset at this point?
I would open a discussion in your family, firstly, about what's been really good about it, what have been the positives that have come out of it, what have been the biggest challenges, and really try to get into the heart of why have these been challenges for us. And it's a very new norm, and there's lots of funny memes about 1-star ratings on 2020 or I want my money back on my subscription. And it's been a year that nobody could have ever predicted. It's been very, very difficult. We are going to be returning to life, which is going to be different in positive ways in some aspects of our lives, but also challenging in others. And I really think it just comes down to having those open discussions and having those conversations about where the children are at. We don't know how to respond to them unless we know what's on their mind. And what I can say to you is that there's a lovely saying around we must listen to all the small things our kids tell us for want of them telling us the big things when they come up, and so just constant conversation is really important. What happens in the minds of anxious kids can be really scary for them. A few examples of kids with intrusive thoughts of being sweet, kind, gentle little people that are having thoughts of harming somebody, but they're just intrusive thoughts, and that can happen, for some children with OCD. Other kids can have a parent who's running late to pick them up, and they can genuinely start to think that parent has been in a fatal car accident. Kids' minds can go to great lengths, especially when they're anxious. And so it's really important as parents that we develop those relationships whereby our kids can be open with us about what it is they're thinking, and that gives us a chance as parents to teach our children to notice their thinking and to observe what they're thinking rather than to be so lost in it. It's very, very hard when we're lost in a thought that mum's had a car accident and that she's not ever coming to pick me up, and all of the disaster that would unfold if that were to happen, because it would be a terrible thing to happen. It's one thing to be lost in that thought with the sick stomach and all of the anxious responses versus going, I notice I'm having a thought that mum's been in a car accident. I notice I'm observing a thought, looking at the thought rather than from it. And so only through talking with our kids can we start to know what they're thinking, and for them to feel safe and vulnerable enough to share openly the good, the bad and the ugly. And for us to be able to normalise and say, look, we all have lots of thoughts that sort of come and go. Our thoughts aren't there to dictate to us. We can notice our thoughts and determine what are helpful and unhelpful thoughts, and use strategies to disconnect from thoughts that have really got us hooked into a terrible story. And so I think as we move into this new normal, for us to really just listen to each other, stay connected, and really keep our eyes out as parents for signs of stress and anxiety. Use the strategy of a thermometer or even the traffic light system so that we can get a gauge on where our kids are at, and learn what helps them with their stress and anxiety, because look, stress and anxiety is a normal part of life. Not all anxiety is a problem. It's only a problem if it's getting in the way of functioning, standing in the way of doing normal daily activities, and it's extreme. So we all need to learn how to manage stress and anxiety, whether it's a disorder or not. And so that really starts by learning how to recognise it, which is what we've talked about here. Yeah. Having those conversations to tune into what our kids are thinking so we know more about where they're at, and then knowing the pathways that we've got ahead of us to support them at school and obviously medically as well.
Absolutely. And I think that, Jodi, it's a great point in that sense, because it's all about the relationship. I know we sort of started talking about that in the beginning, and, we talked about how missing the physical interactions, or the direct social reactions, interactions we have with other people has played such a massive part in terms of the way that we've progressed and how kids have dealt with problems that have been amplified in remote learning. And being able to build those relationships is so crucial. Just having that conversation and talking to one another, or however it is that makes them feel comfortable. And it works, I think, both ways too. It's not just between the kids, the parents of the kids and vice versa, and the teachers of the kids and vice versa. And that is that whole partnership. Just in summary of this, I just wanted to, the last part of your and Michael's book, we were looking at some of the real tangibles, because I know that at the end of this all, people turn around and go, okay, great, we now know what anxiety is. You've talked about what it looks like in the school setting. You've talked about it in the context of the current pandemic. And, just if I read off a few of the things here, we look at, sleeping well, eating well, getting out and moving about, and you've got green time, knowing your values, which you've talked about there, and healthy relationships. But, I guess as a closing sort of part of our conversation, knowing all those things, do you have any advice to parents who kind of go, great, now I know this, we're going to put these things into place now, considering the context? Is there a way that they can do this involving their kids as well, so that moving forward from this, the real positive out of it was, yes, we were, stuck at home, but we were safe with our families. And now we've got these new building relationships based on have you got any advice on that?
So can you just ask the question a little bit more directly for me, Byron? Sure. I know that I just really want to make sure I answer specifically. Could you just...
Absolutely. So using those lifestyle factors there at the end, so the sleeping well, eating well, moving green time, knowing your values, volunteering, and healthy relationships as being part of, I guess, a recipe for a plan forward. How do parents and students, I guess, use this recipe, put it into play, so that they can really see this this pandemic, or this current pandemic, as not being all bad, if I can put it that way, and there's positives come out of it?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for that.
No, you're right.
All of the strategies are well supported by the evidence, and and going back to that human condition of wanting to sort of understand why, there'll be some children who will take on board new lifestyle strategies or tweak the lifestyle strategies they've got in place based on just, look, mum and dad think this is a good idea. Others will want to understand a bit more about it. Definitely as we're moving through back to school and back to work and back to this new normal, certainly sleep is one of the things that's probably got out of hand in a lot of homes. It's very easy when you don't have anything to do in the morning. I know I had a lot of requests of, can we start homeschool at 9:30 or 10 or, sleep is a critical part of looking after our mental health. There's so much that happens in the brain while we're sleeping. It's not just about not moving and resting. There's actually a lot of repair and a lot of change that occurs while we're sleeping that helps with memory, with recovery, recharging our batteries and our mental health, and our bias towards what we look at and what we take in when we're awake. I think with this time at home, we've got time to start easing kids back into a good routine in terms of sleep, bringing that late bedtime forward by 15 minutes or half an hour each night. No doubt lots of families have new habits and routines in daily walks or bike rides. I mean, that's been one of the wonderful things to come out of it. So have a look at what are those healthy mental health habits that you've incorporated that you'd like to continue. When it comes to diet, everyone's been just eating everything that's in the pantry and the fridge. So there are scientific links between what we eat and how we feel in terms of our mood. And Deakin University has an amazing food and mood research centre. So if you're interested in learning more, please go and have a look on that website. Some great research. But high sugar, high fat, high processed food diets that are low in the prebiotics and prebiotics and probiotics, high fiber foods and foods that are fermented to support really good gut health. Those all help. And when we've got a bit more time, we've got a bit more time to cook and try different foods that include maybe legumes, so that we can really work on the microbiota of the gut, which gut also has our second brain. And what
it's
we
just
call
a school bell, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry, keep going.
So 90% of the serotonin, that is the feel-good neurotransmitter in the brain, which is the target of a lot of anxiety medication, which is what is impacted with a lot of the strategies that we can use, is produced in our gut. And so the importance of diet is critical in terms of managing our mental health. The opportunity that we've got at the moment is with students who don't go back for another week or so. And look, of course, we'll be back at school, but there'll still be a lot of time in terms of after school and weekends whereby once there might have been sport or other activities that won't be around. It is a time to think about what healthy lifestyle habits do you want for your family moving forward that can become a part of your routine. And that might be daily meditation or mindfulness. It might be, that walk. It might be just connecting as a family around your fire pit. It could be a whole range of different activities. But think about what it is and don't overdo it. Because if we try to do too much, we often end up doing nothing. Maybe just pick one thing that feels like a really good fit for your family. Start small. Think about where that's going to fit into your week, and sort of really embed that as part of a new family tradition that'll benefit everyone's mental health and physical health and well-being.
I think that's definitely a thing, isn't it? When you have all these great ideas and all these plans, as teachers and as parents, sometimes we have this thing where we go, all right, it's Saturday, we're gonna take them to mini sports, and then we're gonna go have a bit of a walk in the park, and then we're gonna go do a shopping. At the end of the day, you only do maybe one of those three things, and I think that's really great advice. Because teachers, I think we fall into that trap as well, where we go into this lesson and we've got all these things planned out going, we're going to get the guys to do A, B, C, D, da, da, da. And at the end of the day, we don't always get through it all. And, even with experienced teachers, it comes with that experience. Not doing too much, I think, is really important. So on that note as well, I think that, just being mindful of time as well, there's a lot there. And I think it's really great information there, Jodi. Really appreciate your time having a chat with us this morning. And I guess just as a message to families who may be watching this, who would be watching this from home or wherever it is you are. We said this early on, the school always said in the beginning that, it's not a matter of if we get through this, it's a matter of when we get through this. And it's really this point now where we're coming out of the other end. We still got to be cautious. We still got to be careful. But at the same time, now we've got some strategies in place, and remembering that we all are here to support the kids to get the most out of their high school, their secondary school experience. So I really hope that, parents and students listening from wherever it is you are, I really hope that you guys got something out of this. And I guess just in a bit of tongue in cheek at the end to realize, guys, students, we really give a stuff about you. That's why we do these things. Mum and dad do these things to support you. We're here to support you too. Okay. So thanks very much, Jodi, for your time today. And I really, really appreciate that. And just again, at the end, if you didn't see it in the beginning, anyone, this was Jodi's book. If you want to see a little bit more of it, I've read it. This is my personal copy. It's well worth the read. And some of the strategies we've implemented here at Salesian College already, including that traffic light system, and it's brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, Jodi.
What I might do, Byron, is send a couple of copies to you to put in a library for parents to borrow, put into your school library as well. So.
Oh, brilliant! Thanks very much, Jodi. That's great. And you didn't, really, really appreciate it. So thanks very much for your time.
Okay, so yeah, that was a great conversation. I think it's discussing anxiety is never, I guess, an easy topic to talk about, but it's something that I think needs to be spoken about. It was a great opportunity to have a chat with Jodi there to talk about the importance of relationships, talking about schedules in terms of coming back to school, and really being able to take the perspective on whether or not threats are real or not and how we respond to it accordingly. But yeah, really, really great conversation.